Welcome to the Escaping the Accountant's Trap podcast. It's a podcast to help accountants, CPAs, and bookkeepers escape what we call the accountant's trap. It's where accountants are not getting paid for their value and are forced to work long hours with high demanding clients with little pay. Well, how do you escape the trap? And one way is the topic of today's episode, and that's by discovering how to scale your accounting or bookkeeping practice. To help me with the discussion, I've invited Jeff Prager, the co-founder of the CFO Project. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, Adam.
Yeah, so I wanted you to come on this episode because you have a lot of experience in scaling practices. You had your own tax practice at one point and you've essentially scaled it. So if you had to do it all over again, what advice would you give to accountants and bookkeepers now who are sort of stuck in this accountant's trap? What advice would you give them to actually start scaling or thinking about scaling their practice?
Um, that that's an interesting question. There's a lot of dimensions to that question. The first is, why do you want to scale? What are your goals? What do you want out of it? And in doing that, you have to think about number one, how to market it, how to sell your products, and then finally how to fulfill it. So there's going to be four obstacles in growing your business. Number one, cash flow. And just like any business you're consulting to, it follows the same thing. The second one is people. The third is execution. And then the fourth is what strategies are you going to use when? And I could be a little clearer about that too. There are different levels of growth. One is being a sole practitioner. And then the next one is building your momentum, starting to get from a sole practitioner to the next level. And then the next one after that is how do you really scale it up? And then finally, how do you get the growth and value out of your business that you want?
All right, so Jeff, you said that there's four levels essentially that a practice owner would go through. And the first is they're a sole proprietor. They're essentially the business themselves.
Mm-hmm.
What is the terminology used?
Just growing solo.
Okay, growing solo. Would you say, and I know this is a leading question, but would you say that most accounting firms are in that stage?
I think there's a good mix of accounting firms that are trying to grow, but really haven't used the right strategies to grow.
Okay.
But yeah, there are a lot of sole practitioners and or practitioners who are just kind of winging it by hiring in temporary people at peak times during the year, like tax season or outside bookkeepers or something of that nature. But going solo is where you're responsible for the marketing, the sales, and the fulfillment.
Okay.
And that's what I mean by going solo.
Got it. Okay. And then what's the last level, the one where you really have scaled the practice?
Oh, I call that the breakthrough. Um,
Okay.
the breakthrough is where the practice can run with or without you.
Okay. All right. So what would you say is the biggest obstacle from going from a solo to a breakthrough practice?
It's not going through the steps or rushing through the steps.
Okay.
In other words, um, getting the SOPs ready, the standard operating procedures ready from phase to phase. So let's say you're in the growing phase and you hire a marketing or a business development person. Have you yourself understood the role? Do you really know what's required? And can you outsource it and or hire an employee to do it properly? And then if they are, can you document it so that person doesn't be a critical bottleneck in your business? In other words, if they were to leave, your whole business would go back to being a solo practice. So that's what I mean is getting the depth that you need to go from one stage to another.
So the first, just to make sure we're clear, the first stage is the solo stage.
Yes.
The second stage is the growing stage, correct?
Right.
And the difference between the first stage and the second stage, from the solo to the growing, is having SOPs documented that other people can
Follow.
use.
Right. Right. That's
Okay.
correct. Now, in the building momentum, you're in that's a transition stage.
Okay.
And what's going to happen is you're going to hire somebody to take off something off your plate, right? And your goal is you're still not totally out of it. You're trying to get rid of it, but you're not out of it. So you're still fulfilling all three roles: marketing, sales, fulfillment. Client satisfaction is part of fulfillment in my mind. Okay. So you're fulfilling all those roles. It's just you're starting the delegation process and
Mm.
you're learning as you go. And that's the problem with each phase. You've got to recognize there's more to learn as you go.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. So in the solo stage, you're essentially doing marketing, sales, and fulfillment
You're doing
yourself.
everything.
Yeah. Okay. Then you advance to the next stage where you have those three areas documented in an SOP, and then you say essentially you're starting to find people that could fill those, but you yourself, the practice owner, is still primarily doing all three.
In the growing stage, yes. I mean, it's
Okay.
still way hands-on.
Got it. Okay. But
And
you
and
have,
it and it's
but you're,
almost like acting by yourself because you're mentoring whatever role you don't wanna do. It could be sales, it could be lead generation or fulfillment. You still have your hands deeply involved in it.
do you have a recommendation to listeners about which of those three roles, sales, marketing, or fulfillment, they should get rid of? They should delegate first?
Well, if we're talking about typical accountants, most of us hate marketing, and we hate marketing more than we hate sales,
Yeah.
and we hate sales less than we hate fulfillment.
Right.
But no matter what, it's a pain,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's be realistic about it.
Yeah.
So, I the hardest part of any business, not just in our profession, is marketing.
Yeah.
Getting people to raise their hand and say, "I'd be interested in buying from you." They're not making a commitment to buy from you, but they're saying they're interested in buying from you. That is by far the hardest phase of any business.
Yeah.
With us, normally the typical accountant really despises marketing. So if you really do, what's going to happen is you're not going to do it at all,
Mm.
right? Because you don't do the things you'll find excuses not to do it. Even though you have a recipe, document what you're doing, go after associations, go to get strategic partners. You know what to do intellectually, but you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And you're going to
And
find excuses.
wouldn't you say that keeps a lot of people in that first phase, the solo phase, because they don't have enough clients, enough revenue coming in to advance to the next level?
Right. Right. And so at some point, you've got to make a decision that you have to do something you don't like in order to finally delegate it.
Mm.
Right. And so delegation is very hard. You're going to make mistakes in who you delegate it to. And that's why you're still very hands on. In fact, as you go through this stage, you're actually going to work a little bit harder
Yeah.
because you're really, in a way, and I hate using this word, you've got to micromanage that person until they understand how to do it without you.
Mm.
I don't mean permanent micromanagement. That's a recipe for disaster.
Right.
But in the beginning, you are micromanaging.
Yeah. I
And
I know
go ahead.
you and I've talked about this several times. One of my biggest weaknesses is not being able to delegate because I feel like I can do a lot of things better than I think other people could do them. But that is something that is just going to hold me back if I continue to have that philosophy.
Exactly. And then I'd like to throw a different wrinkle into it. What if they could do it better than you by
Yeah.
not doing what you're telling them to do?
Yeah.
And
I
that's
read
why
something.
it requires a very open mind
Yeah.
when you hire people. because
I
they
I
are
read
not
something.
you.
Hey there, Adam here from the Escaping the Accountant's Trap podcast. I'd like to personally invite you to a free masterclass that we're conducting this Thursday called How to Start a CFO Service. To register, just go to thecfoproject.com and click free training at the top. See you then. I've been pleasantly surprised lately, with things that I've delegated to other people that actually have gotten done better than I would have done it myself. I actually read that somewhere last week that you should ask somebody to tell somebody what to do, but just not how to do it, and then just you know, uh, be surprised by the results. You'll be surprised by the positive results because they are figuring out ways to do it that you may not have thought of.
If you hired the right person.
If yes, if you that's important. And that's actually my next question. So we're right now in the second stage, the growing stage, and you're suggesting everybody document their procedures so that you could find people. How do you find somebody that is competent enough to follow the SOPs that you've written out? I mean, if you're tight on cash flow, what are some strategies? What are things that you've done to hire people that when you may not be 100% ready to hire somebody?
Um, well, number one, like any growth, you need to have cash to get through the next stage. So if you're just living hand to mouth, you will never grow.
Hmm.
You just can't. So for every level, let's say you hire a marketing director and it's going to take them really 3 to 6 months before you see results.
Yeah.
That means that you have to have at least enough cash to carry that person for 3 to 6 months. If you don't, you will fail. Cash is the answer to everything. We all know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But the right amount of cash is equally important.
Yeah.
And knowing the risk you're taking, the benefit you're going for, and how to mitigate that risk.
And that's one of the reasons why we're fans of advisory services, because if you're in the solo phase, if you can start offering advisory services, you can generate way more cash flow fairly quickly so that you can advance to the next stage, the growing stage.
Which gets me to a good point about accountants. We forget how long it took us to learn what we know, and we
Yeah.
usually give our answers for free.
Mm. Why is that?
It's just the nature of it. We discount what we know, and we don't realize that what we know is rocket science to our clients.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. How many people out there think we accountants are mathematicians?
A lot.
Right. And what do we really know? Third grade math, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division.
Right.
What
Right.
we do that they don't understand is we're good at comparing numbers to trends, to where
Mm.
goals, to things of that nature. That's what we're good at, looking at two numbers and pointing our thumbs up or down,
Right.
right? I mean, if you really want to summarize what we accountants do, it's pointing our thumbs.
Mm.
So we take it for granted, like let's say you're asked a tax question and you know immediately which tax code section they're talking about and how to deal with it. So you just blurt it out. And the the client doesn't think it has much value because it was so easy for you,
Mm.
as opposed to saying, "Ooh, that's complicated. Let me think it out."
Yeah.
And actually do think about, okay, what are the ramifications of what I'm saying? And when you realize that we're giving away a lot of our experience, hard earned experience for free, that will change your mind on how you deal with your clients.
Yeah. I
I,
mean,
I mean, I look at I work for a big eight accounting firm, which dates me. They're big four now. But in the beginning, I've got to say, I was worthless. But as I progressed through the ranks, my value went up and up. But my skill set, it took me a while to realize that it took me a while to learn what I knew.
mm.
And so I was giving it away for free.
Yeah. I mean, to remedy that, you think of your knowledge as a product that you could sell, but you have to sell it. You have to sell your knowledge and package it in a way that people want to buy, but they will want to buy it because they want your advice. They
They
want your
want that
guidance.
experience.
Right.
And that's what we discount in our profession is
Yeah.
our experience and the things we've seen and how long it really takes to be good at this profession.
Yeah. Because I think we all underestimate how much we know because it just comes easy to us.
It's easy to us, but like think about our perception again. They think we're rocket scientists when it comes to math. But deep down we know we're not,
Right.
which leads a little bit to imposter syndrome too.
Yeah.
It's easy for us, but it's not easy for them.
Yeah. I agree. Okay, so step one or phase one is a solo practice. Phase two is the growing practice where you've created SOPs. What's the third phase?
Scaling up.
Okay, so what's the
Once you
difference between the growing phase and the scaling up phase?
The growing phase is you're going through the mechanics of delegating, developing the SOPs, and um, figuring out your niche. You're still active.
Hmm.
Now, in the scaling up, you're actually going to delegate stuff off your plate completely.
Mm,
And you may specialize, let's say, in fulfillment, but give marketing and sales to other people completely and let them handle it.
mm,
All right. Until we get to growth where you're actually looking at the management of the company versus having your finger in anything.
mm.
So what we're dealing with is your growth to being strategic in your thinking and your delegation of the compliance slash routine work.
So if we just say, so just to summarize, solo phase, you're doing everything.
Yep.
In the second phase,
Building momentum.
yeah, you're the second phase, you're the growing phase. You're still doing everything, but you're also trying to take steps to get it off your plate, but you're still pretty much doing everything. But in this third stage, the scaling up stage, you're actually taking pieces of what you used to do and now you're completely offloading it to somebody else, but you're still doing something. You're still doing
Right.
either the sales, the marketing, or the fulfillment
Right.
and or business managing the business itself.
Right.
And so the fourth stage is what do you call the fourth stage?
The growth stage.
The growth
Where
stage.
now all you have to do is hire more people and expand the practice.
And so pretty much you're out of this sales, marketing, and fulfillment, and you're just managing the practice.
Right. And the breakthrough is when you can take long vacations
Yeah.
and not worry about anything.
What percentage of non-large accounting firms, so small, medium-sized accounting firms, what percentage of those do you feel have made it to that fourth growth stage?
I think to the growth stage, we see a lot of practices with a lot, let's say 10 to 15, 20 employees or more.
Yeah.
Okay. But what the owner has done is created a nightmare for themselves in that they're constantly looking at everything. They're worried about every little thing, client satisfaction, but not from a macro level, a management level, but from a practitioner level. And there's a difference. And you want to get to the point as the owner of a really sound practice of running a factory, if you will,
Mm,
right? Like you could own a car wash, but you don't have to be the guy taking the tickets. You don't have to be the guy maintaining the equipment. You don't have to be the guy to do anything.
yeah.
All right. Your job in the final stage is to be strategic. In other words, where am I going? Am I following the market trends? Am I giving my market what they want? You're thinking at that level now. Product development, efficiency, or whatever. But it's more of a macro level where you're running it like a CEO instead of a business owner.
Mm,
So we went from job to business owner. Now let's go to CEO.
that makes sense. That makes sense. So, as we wrap up here, what is the one piece of advice you would give somebody who is at the solo level right now, thinking, getting to that growth stage just seems very daunting. What
Oh,
advice would you give for them right now?
it's like launching a rocket ship. The hardest part is takeoff. That's where you use the most fuel.
Mm,
And once the flywheel starts going, if you will, the further it gets up in altitude, the less fuel it's using, believe it or not. And finally, you have a module up there, and it's has very little fuel inside of it.
interesting.
Okay, so what you're trying to do is get the flywheel going, and that's the hardest part.
Yeah.
The riskiest part of this whole strategy is right in the beginning, building momentum and letting go. And
Mm,
that's hard for a lot of people. In fact, they may never do it.
yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for sharing those 4 stages. I really appreciate it.
I love being here.
And to everyone listening or watching, thank you so much for spending the last few minutes with us as we discussed how to escape the accountant's trap. Bye for now.